the facing of challenges is itself a meta skill. It's a meta skill. And so if we're just protecting people from challenges, then we're not actually allowing them to grow within their skills. Particularly as men, I think a lot of people are waking up to this reality that we have raised a generation of weak and unstable men that are not actually able to face challenges and to be able to endure them. The core thing that we're aiming to work at really is the bonding experience of being a group of guys, solving some kind of challenge together. That's, they're struggling through, they're going through some suffering together, and they're learning through that process. In my work with men, doing training programs, development programs, men's groups, that kind of stuff, gatherings, I often have to challenge men, as in actually issue a concrete challenge to somebody to do something, obviously with the aim of getting them to learn and grow through the experience. And in thinking about issuing these challenges, then one thing that's actually helped me is a concept that I learned in my training as a sports trainer or sports coach. I was a rock climbing coach, trained in the Danish Federation of Sports. And it's called the zone of proximal development. It's actually a theory that's developed by a Russian, Lev Vygotsky. And I've really found it useful in thinking about challenges and how to design them. And then also there's actually something that I think that Vygotsky missed in his theory. I think he was dividing things up a little bit too much and not looking at the bigger picture. Typical of the scientists of his day, he formulated this in the 1920s in the Soviet Union, and really kind of like tend to dissect a lot, trying to go deeper and deeper understanding the human mind, but lost the bigger picture in the process. So at least in my work, where I'm really aiming at developing the deeper level of men, trying to kind of change of heart, you could say, instead of just teaching mathematics or something like that, which was, of course, Vygotsky's approach. I think there's another layer to look at. So I'm going to explain the concept and then also explain why the concept's actually also useful to look at the deeper level as well, which was something that Vygotsky missed. So I'm going to share or show you a little picture here where you can see the basic diagram. It's not actually originally made by Vygotsky in this way. It's been developed further since him, but I think it actually gives a great insight into the theory as it's being used today. So here we have what's called the zone of proximal flow, also called the zone of proximal development, which I think is a better word to use it. And you have a graph here where on the y-axis we have the level of challenge, how difficult something is, and on the x-axis we have the level of skill that the learner has, enabled to, the ability that he has to tackle the challenge that he's facing. And in rock climbing, this is obviously someone trying to climb a more and more difficult route or problem. In school, then it's doing more and more advanced mathematics or whatever the subject happens to be. And so what you can see is as the level of challenge increases, then you need a higher degree of skill to be able to complete the challenge. If you don't have that skill, then you get up into this red zone. A lot of times it's also used the word anxiety. So especially when it comes to rock climbing, we spoke about anxiety, shut down, panic, or something like that. So obviously at a certain level, then people just like, if they've never climbed a rock wall before and then they find themselves, on an overhang 20 meters up in the air, then they can be quite anxiety provoking and it's too difficult to learn anything. On the other hand of things, if things are too easy and you don't actually possess or the challenge is not high enough compared to the skill, so you have a professional rock climber, and then he has to, just do like, very, very easy, like grade 5, 6 routes, then he's going to get very bored and he's not going to be interested and his mind will go to other things and his capacity will not be occupied by the problem at hand. And so what you would instead want to do is to get above. First of all, you have the first level, which is aimed, there's like a kind of a sense of flow where you're actually immersed. So this is something like, driving a car down a windy road very fast is, something that, or maybe, at a faster pace, then it fully engages your senses and you step into this experience of flow, which, at least some psychologists talk about the flow state as something that brings a lot of meaningfulness and connectedness to life in some way. And it's definitely the flow state is something that there's something to being fully engaged in a problem, being faced with a constant challenge that's fully taking up your senses all the time, and then meeting that challenge with your fullest of your abilities, being engaged. And so, yeah, the first state here is the flow state, where you're comfortable and able to do it. The next one is called the zone of proximal development, where you're a little bit outside of what you already know, a little bit outside of what you're able to manage, but you're learning. And so getting as high up in the zone of development is a really positive thing that you can do, and it can help you to learn faster when you find the right level and to find that level of development. And so some people, if you have a group of 10 guys, you need to give them a challenge, then one needs to realize that you need to be able to adjust some of the aspects of the challenge. So, guys who go out for a hike the whole night, finding posts, having to navigate with a map and a compass, stuff like that. That's what we do. And obviously for some guys that's quite easy, and for some guys it's incredibly difficult. If you have military experience or a lot of outdoor navigation experience, then that's going to help you a lot. Some guys have never live in a big city and never go out more than to the local park to sit and have a beer on the grass with their friends, then that's going to be really tough. And so there's many ways that you can adjust the difficulty levels. One of the things we do, for example, is to give guys heavier weight in their backpack. So, we can have one guy carrying 25 kilograms, the other guy just has 3 or 4 kilograms, something like that. The core thing that we're aiming to work at really is the bonding experience of being a group of guys, solving some kind of challenge together. That's, they're struggling through, they're going through some suffering together, and they're learning through that process. And so that's the real thing. And so you want them all to be given roughly the same amount of challenge to be able to do that as much as possible, so they can learn. Vygotsky, the guy who made this theory, he used it to make a case for focusing much more on autonomous learning without tests. He really didn't like in children having tests. And personally, I think tests are actually a good thing. I think that tests are a very realistic imitation of real life. So, a lot of people say like, oh yeah, the things that I'm going in my mathematics test for are totally irrelevant. I'm never going to use this information. And such a artificial kind of environment where I have to sit down and answer some questions that I'll never have to do anyway. But in reality, if you look at a little bit at the bigger picture, then tests are actually something that you very often have in normal life as well. And that's everything from an important conversation you have to have with your wife to some kind of project that you have to complete for a job assignment, where you're given a deadline and you're given criteria for success and failure, and there's going to be pressure on you to succeed with all of these things. And so you have to deliver the goods. And often you don't get more than one chance. In fact, very often in life, one mess up, one mistake in some kind of test, even in a very important personal relationship, can result in failure that has irreparable consequences. And I myself have sometimes failed in these kinds of tests that I've had in relationships with other people, in work environments, and all kinds of other environments. So being able to, for a lot of people, increasingly as we have a society where people are protected from tests, the local school where I live here doesn't have any tests and refuses to have tests. And for me, we're really doing people, I'm not saying you have to believe this, but I believe personally that we're doing people a misservice, especially children a misservice, by never allowing them to be exposed to tests. Because the problem is that they're, according to this graph here, their level of skill is very low. And so when they suddenly come to a situation where there's a high level of challenge, then they just can't handle it and they collapse, because they very quickly go into anxiety. And so what you'll see is if you're regularly exposed to tests, for example, then as you grow on this graph here in your level of skill, then you can hold and handle higher and higher levels of challenge that you can then be in a flow state when you do them, or be continuing to learn even more, of course, and not going up into that anxiety, too difficult state. And so, the deeper issue that I think is at play here is that the facing of challenges is itself a meta skill. It's a meta skill. And so if we're just protecting people from challenges, then we're not actually allowing them to grow within their skills. And by helping children to face challenge, exposing to them that, even allowing them to suffer, to struggle and to suffer, that's also a deep character trait in a person that if they're exposed to that, even you want to be as much as possible in almost every level of life to be touching this red line as often as you can. You don't want to cross the red line. You don't want to go into frustration and anxiety. You do want to give the person, the learner, the opportunity to succeed. But if you never experience failure, and you always get protected from the possibility of failure, then you're actually going to be limiting the growth potential greatly, and you'll never actually know whether you're approaching this line. Because the only real way you can know when you get to this line is when you do fail. Of course, that needs to happen. And so I think, particularly as men, I think a lot of people are waking up to this reality that we have raised a generation of weak and unstable men that are not actually able to face challenges and to be able to endure them. And I think men in many different levels of skill and robustness and strength have realized this. And so, in my work with men, I just started a new group today, actually. And that's what got me to think about this, is that, men are at very, very different levels. But it's not important what level they're at. What's important is whether they're on this journey of exposing themselves to challenge at the right level and helping to adjust that challenge in order to be able to grow as a human being. Most men try to do too much at one time. That's why we created our Genesis workshop, which introduces you to the 4 foundational roles of being a man and sets you up with one simple habit to set you on the right path. So check out the link below for our Genesis workshop and hope to see you there. Thanks. And yeah, I think that's something that we're going to continue to see the need for. We're going into more challenging times. We've had very comfortable time, especially in a country like Denmark, where I live. But more and more it's becoming apparent that men need to be stepping up and taking responsibility, actually. And certainly that's the main thing that I think that is valuable for men to take responsibility for. The course that we've started is about the core foundational roles that every man needs to be ready for in his life and needs to learn from in his life. And these are the roles of being a son, where you have to submit and learn to honor that which is above you and which you probably don't understand. It's learning to be a brother, where you're standing next to somebody else, and you have to find the right balance between sharpening each other, keeping each other focused and on goal, and holding each other accountable, but then also lifting each other up and supporting each other and being a brother that can, be loyal and loving, while not, compromising, not loving in the way that you ignore his failures and try and cover them up and just comfort him instead as well. Then the next core role is the husband, where I basically see it as you have to learn to submit to something which is fundamentally different to yourself, and there's like a mystery there to be explored and discovered about the synergy of actually learning something like self-sacrificing love. To really give yourself to the other, not as a lapdog, not as a kind of, something to walk over, but something that is still taking responsibility for the overall relationship, but being able to love past his own selfish desires and wants as well. So looking at the whole instead of just himself. Finally, then, we have the role of the father. Which is, of course, about creation and something that is beyond what I can share on this video, but it's about learning to really be a son again. I think that is, for me, learning that we're always still sons, need to submit to what is above us. We have to be a son before we can be a father and create after the image of something that's going to fit into the whole. So yeah, that was the zone of proximal development. I hope you found the talk interesting. Taking a theory actually really from the psychological kind of pedagogical school and applying it to just the way that we, especially for men, I think, need to grow in our current society today. So thanks for listening. Let me know if you have any comments. I'd be happy to hear what you have to say.